Hello everyone, Golden Nova here. So, as of the time of writing, things are looking pretty sparse when it comes to new releases. Duelists of Pyrazine has Amazonas, which I've already covered, Ishizu's Cards, which would mean I'd have to talk about Kelbeck, and the new Morphtronic, which I'm kinda saving as part of the 5Ds milestone specials down the line. Something that also applies to all the new Blackwing support in Darkwing Strike. Boy, that episode is gonna be a doozy. So, I've been scrolling through the backlog, looking to find any interesting themes I haven't had a chance to talk about yet, when it finally dawned on me. Splites are taking the world by storm, and there's a level 2 theme I haven't talked about yet that slots in with them perfectly. So, I present to you the Aqua-type menaces you all know and love, Paleozoics! While premiering in the TCG in the August 2016 core set, The Dark Illusion, the archetype is actually the rare occurrence of being a Korean exclusive first, rather than premiering in the TCG or Japan, which is super neat. Aesthetically, they're all based on fossilized sea creatures discovered in the Burgess Shale, dating all the way back to the Cambrian period, which was roughly 500 million years ago. Which, on top of being reflected in their outstanding art, is also brought to life by their trap card status, because playing a game versus these kinds of decks feels like it takes 500 million years. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so before I spoil any more of this theme's unique mechanics, let's take another look through the museum to review these new specimens, revive them to see what they're all about, then see if any other specimens can fit in with their fossil record. It's time to do a deep dive into Paleozoics. But before we continue, a quick reminder to please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed my content so far. We're on the road to 100,000 subscribers, and there's no better way to get there than on our Duel Runners. Our next stop is 30k, where we'll have Jack Atlas Explained, which includes Resonators, Red Dragon Archfiend, and whatever other cards were used by the Master of Foster. We've also got our Discord, which now has the best Alistair face. I'm also on Twitch, where you can join me for viewer duels and progression pools, and don't forget about my Patreon, where you can gain access to my videos early, reach some of these milestones, as well as helping to determine which explained videos I make. Thank you all so much for watching, and now, back to the video. So, what's the deal with Paleozoics? Well, that's the rub, isn't it? See, as far as traditional monsters go, we don't have any that exist in the main deck. Those all live in the extra deck. Our main deck is actually populated by a series of normal trap cards with a variety of effects, but they all have one through line. While in the grave, once per chain, if a trap card is activated, you can special summon them to the field as level 2 Water Aqua normal monsters with 1200 attack and 0 defense. At this point, they are not treated as trap cards, which is an important distinction from the majority of trap card monsters, and if special summoned via their own effect, they're unaffected by other monsters' effects, and they're banished when they leave the field. This makes them surprisingly difficult to interact with outside the battle phase. No monster-based removal can cut through them, and anything that only affect monsters will glance right off them, because despite having the lingering effect of being unaffected by monster effects, it does say they're normal monsters. They also grow in number fairly quickly, owing to the fact that by activating one Paleozoic normal trap, you can special summon one from the grave. Then, activating another trap card summons the other Paleozoic, and you can keep doing this over and over again until you have a whole field of prehistoric punks. Though, take note, this effect, much like Thunder Dragon Titan, can miss timing. It relies specifically on reacting to something while a chain is forming. So if you activate a trap card, pass priority to your opponent, and they do anything aside from activating a normal trap card, then your Grave Paleo won't have a chance to activate. Though, if your opponent activates a trap card, passing priority to you, then you got nothing to worry about. So, without further ado, let's get to our main roster of underwater Undertakers. Paleozoic Canadia targets a face-up monster your opponent controls and changes it to face-down defense position. So it's our theme's version of Book of Moon, though it only works on our opponent's monsters. It doesn't let us turn the effect on ourselves in case we need the protection from a card like Effect Veiler or Infinite Impermanence, which is kind of a shame. You'd think the downgrade from Quick Play Spell to normal trap card would afford it a bit more flexibility, but I suppose it comes in the form of turning into a giant sea worm. Yeah, now that I think about it, Book of Moon, you've got to work harder. Why can't you be more like your cousin, Impcantation Bookstone? Paleozoic Dynamicious targets a face-up card on the field, and on resolution, you discard a card, and if you do, banish it. Now, this is worded very specifically because I imagine that if you discarded as cost, and if the discarded card was a Paleozoic, if your opponent didn't have any response, you could just immediately summon that Paleozoic. So they had to give it some breathing room. On the upside, since it's still a discard, it still triggers things like Danger, and because it's an effect, it'll actually trigger cards like Dark World and Shaddolls. And banishing removal is hard to pass up. Outside themes that focus on it, banishing a card is one of the best ways to deal with it. Now, if someone could explain to me why Dinomicious looks like someone took a Sharingan and turned the content aware filter up, I'd super appreciate it. Paleozoic Eldonia targets a face-up monster on the field and grants it a 500 attack and defense boost until the end of the turn. This will be pretty useful because of our already middling stats, and because it changes attack and defense, we can even activate this during the damage step to get that little extra power at the last second. However, you will not want to lean on this interaction very often, because what makes it possible to use Eldonia during the damage step is exactly the kind of thing that's going to cause you to miss triggers for your Paleozoics in Grave. See, the only things you can activate during the damage step are effects that directly alter attack and defense, effects that negate activations, and trigger effects. It's actually why you see so many except during the damage step clauses, because otherwise you'd get to do all kinds of things. Which might lead you to think, well, what's the problem here? The Grave effects are in response to a trap card's activation, so it's a trigger, right? And that's where that little once per chain section comes in, because that denotes it as an activated effect. It's just one that can only be activated during a very specific time. So if you use Eldonia on attack declaration, then great, you can activate a Paleo in Grave to summon it. If you wait to the damage step, you're out of luck because Graveyard Paleos don't meet any of the requirements needed to activate at that time. Aren't rulings fun? Paleozoic Hallucigenia targets a face-up monster on the field, and its attack and defense become half its current attack and defense until the end of the turn. This one is much better at bringing your opponent's monsters down to your level, and it'll let you trade with any monster that has 2400 or less attack without any other debuffs or buffs being accounted for. It also follows the same stuff I said about Eldonia, so don't get greedy in the battle phase trying to dodge certain kinds of effects. It'll only shrink your chances of winning. Paleozoic Leonqualia targets a banished card and returns it to the grave. It's a simple effect, but it has a few tricky usages. The main reason you're probably already picking up on is that your Paleozoics get banished after they become monsters, but Leonqualia can put them back in your grave to be summoned later. And that's certainly one way to use them. Another is just slightly different, angling it towards any other strategy you pair with them. If that theme banishes its own cards from the grave, then you can reset those with Leonqualia as well. But my personal favorite is the ability to interact with face-down banished cards, which is currently the most difficult to work with zone in the game. If you want to get rid of a card, that's how you do it. And that's why so many good cards, like the latest Pot of cards, require your costs to be paid in face-down banished cards. While there are plenty that don't mind being banished, while face-down, they might as well be vanillas for all the good they'll do. And because being face-down keeps them from having any kind of characteristics, they can't be interacted by most card effects. Even something as innocuous as Burial from a Different Dimension, which targets and returns monsters from your banished zone to the grave, can't do that because, well, you can't target monsters with it. They're all face down. And that's the beauty of Leonqualia, because it only targets a banished card, which even face down, well, cards are. So you can put back a card you banished with desires, or something that was taken from you via evenly matched. Either way, it'll help you to avoid facing those consequences. Paleozoic Morella sends a trap card from your deck to the grave. Once again, a card that has utility in our own deck, namely by flooding our grave with even more Paleozoics, but can also assist with other decks. One that has some very specific significance coming out soon is the new Ishizu support. It's enamored with the idea of having Exchange of the Spirit in your grave, and I don't know about you, but I do not want to run multiple copies of that card. But flip Morella and you'll get that all taken care of. Some other examples include Eldritch. While the deck is already very well positioned to do so, it can send Golden Land continuous traps to the grave, do a penalty box for a deck that's less equipped to do that, or Blaze Accelerator Reload for some explosive results. Paleozoic Olenoids targets a Speller Trap card on the field and destroys it. Heck yeah, Dust Tornado that can transform into a prehistoric monstrosity. Sweet! Many of the other Paleos have some kind of subtle usage, but this time, it's just back row removal. And because of that, I don't have a joke for you. This card's pretty down to earth, or I guess water, so being silly feels a little out of place. Our last trap card is Paleozoic Pikaia, which discards a Paleozoic card to draw 2 cards. This discard is, once again, part of the effect, so you don't get a free Paleozoic summon, but bonus, like with Dinomicious, if this gets negated, you don't have to discard the card, so that's pretty neat. Unlike Dinomicious, you can't discard cards from other themes for some sweet synergy, but that's just the life of the archetypal draw 2 effect. You can't Pikaia and choose how it works. Alright, now it's time to move on to the Xyz monsters. A very fortunate monster type to be associated with, as it turns out. Like we learned with Time Thieves, a monster set to be banished when it leaves the field makes for great Xyz material, because once it does so, it's no longer on the field. So when sent to the grave from this point, it'll just go to the grave. This means, if we're smart little cookies, we can trigger our Paleozoic summons, overlay them into our Xyz, and when they're detached, we can summon them again because they'll go to the grave. Also, like their trap card counterparts, their water aqua monsters were just rank 2 instead of level 2, and they get to keep the effect that makes them unaffected by other monsters' effects. First, we have Paleozoic Anomalocaris, a monster with 2400 attack and 0 defense, which requires 3 or more level 2 monsters as material. Once per turn, if any number of trap cards are sent from the spell and trap zone to the grave, except during the damage step, you can excavate the top card of your deck, and if it's a trap card, you can add it to your hand. Otherwise, send it to the grave. And once per turn, during either player's turn, if this card has a trap card as Xyz material, you can detach 1 material to target a card on the field and destroy it. So you can't just splash this into any level 2 deck, unless they're also splashing the regular Paleos, but at full power this is completely nutty. At 2400 attack, it'll take your opponent fielding something sizable to get over it, but we have cards like Eldonia and Hallucigenia to tip the scales back in our favor. It can also potentially buy back our resources, because the Excavate effect triggers just by activating one of your trap cards, though it can also do so if it gets Twin Twistered. And having a quick effect pop has already proven in a variety of formats to be warpingly strong, especially if the source doing it is difficult to interact with. And you can do that for 3 turns! Normally your card has to be in the triple-digit price range to do something like that. Talk about anomalous behavior. Paleozoic Opabinia, a monster with 0 attack and 2400 defense, requiring 2 level 2 monsters as material, allows you to activate your Paleozoic trap cards directly from your hand. And if this card has a trap card as Xyz material, you can detach a material to add a Paleozoic trap card from your deck to your hand. So one of the drawbacks for using Paleozoics is the wind-up time you need to activate your trap cards. Opabinia has other opinions though. By being able to activate your Paleos from hand, you can interact with threats much more quickly, and turbos out your grave Paleos to help make even more Xyz. It also doesn't hurt that there are no hard once per turns on any of your trap card Paleozoics, so you can keep activating and summoning for as long as you have them. And thankfully, Opabinia can help with that too. Not only getting the ball rolling by ensuring you have a Paleo in hand to activate, you can add whichever one best fits the situation. And they're a huge fan of penguins. Is that because they're all aqua? No. It's because Opabinia is doing its best Newt impression. Now, on the complete opposite end of the scale of great extra deck monsters to pair with Paleos, we also have the Link 2 Paleozoic Cambraraster, a Link 2 water aqua monster with 1200 attack, requiring 2 Paleozoic monsters as material. So you'll either need to banish your trap card monsters, or use your Xyz. Either way, it's still unaffected by other monsters' effects, and they can target a set card in the spell and trap zone and send it to the grave, and if you do, set a Paleozoic trap card directly from your deck, and it can be activated this turn. And if any number of set cards you control would be destroyed by card effect, you can banish this card from your grave instead. So while this has a little less synergy by way of summoning mechanics, this card is still actually really fire. Best case scenario, you use Cambraraster to send a set spell and trap your opponent controls to the grave to get your own, or you can set your own card and just swap them out. And because the Paleo you set can be activated this turn, if you sent a Paleo to grave to get that one, then it'll be primed to be summoned immediately. Its grave effect is also very helpful in making sure your cards don't get sniped, both your back row and your own monsters. Note that while Cambraraster asks you to send a set card in the spell and trap zone for its Paleo setting effect, effect, its Grave effect can protect any of your set cards. This will still generally apply to your back row, but if an access code tries to smash your set monster to make way for game, this weird little sea pancake is here to help. Alright, so that's all the Paleozoic cards, but what do we do with them? Well, this is another example of a deck that works best as a supplemental archetype to another theme. While we have strong removal and a lot of utility cards, we lack a very strong win condition. However, there's a lot of decks with good win conditions, but lack the support and flexibility needed to reach their goals, so that's where our deck comes in. But what other decks can we play Paleos in to help them out? Getting this out of the way first, it's Frogs. While Splites have kind of usurped this position, Paleo Frogs has been a top pick amongst stall and stun players for the longest time. Because while Frogs have an incredible monster in Totally Awesome, that's kind of the only thing they had without resorting to some kind of tribute monster to take advantage of their free material. Paleos come along and provide removal, attack bonuses, and extra material to Xyz summon Totally Awesome, because all the Paleos are Aqua. So you could limit your opponent's actions with powerful trap cards and Toad's Omni Negate, and once the coast was clear, you summon a bunch of little weenies and attack for game. Another deck I feel has some great synergy with Paleo is Traptrix, though this is more about adding onto the deck's strengths rather than shoring up its weaknesses. Traptrix are already very fond of activating trap cards, but the holes are very reactive. Once your opponent catches on to what you're doing, they can find a way to play around it. The Paleos are more proactive, as you can either stifle your opponent outright, or coax them into making moves that fall right into your trap holes. And hey, adding Paleos means you can potentially add Totally Awesome to this deck as well. We should also make sure that we pair Paleos with a variety of trap cards that are easy to activate, so we can summon our Paleos whenever we want. Cards like Compulsory Evacuation Device, Ice Dragon's Prison, and Infinite Impermanence are all great candidates. And if you want to get a little risky, you can try playing Reckless Greed, digging you into the cards you need, but once you've gotten to them, you better make them count, because your deck isn't giving you anything else to work with for 2 turns. We can use revival effects to get back our Xyz, but we'll only be getting part of their effects without a trap card as material. This is what makes Xyz Reborn the perfect way to bring them back at full power. How about some other rank 2s we can go into with them? Well, there's not a lot of them that work with us super well. Gachi Gachi Gentetsu might have mitigated our low stats, if not for the fact that our Paleos are unaffected by all other monster effects, including our own. And because of this, not only will Cat Shark not be able to make Anomalocaris enormous, but it also doesn't benefit from the Battle Destruction immunity effect because its materials would no longer be water. But Crumble Logos can deal with the effects of any face-up card, Phantom Knights of Cursed Javelin works on monsters only, but also zeroes out their attack, and if you're up against a monster that can't be targeted by either of them, make Sky Cavalry Centaria and bounce that thing back to the hand. As for a silly tech pick, I'm partial to one of the Master Magician's oldest tricks, Magical Hats. While the Paleozoics get banished as monsters, it only does so when they're summoned by their own effect. So the ones you set to the field by Magical Hats will just go to the graveyard when the effect runs out. And this works because while they're in the deck, the Paleos are still trap cards. So you can give your monster a chance to not be destroyed by battle while venting 2 Paleozoics into the grave. Heck, it's even a trap card, so you can trigger an in-grave Paleo on top of that. I love Yu-Gi-Oh! And that's all I have to say about Paleozoic. It's a nifty little archetype full of utility effects, and wherever there's a deck that wants to play Yu-Gi-Oh! By its own rules, and pilots who yearn for the days of longer games, this theme will be there to bolster their ambitions. With the help of these deep-sea critters, you'll be able to hold up well under pressure. Like, a lot of pressure. Like, a lot of pressure. Like Marianas Trench levels pressure. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Are Paleozoics as deep as the deep end of the pool, or are they all out of carbon date? Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to show your support, ring that bell so you don't miss an episode, and share this video with someone you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode was brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commander, Ashling Waltz, Nebula Navigators, 3rd Dynasty, Avagule, Adam Zajdel, Benjamin Meisner, Biohazard 011, Eric, Frankie, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh!, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Howling Zangetsu, Inblink, Ironic, John Manji, Julius Sneezer, Larakia, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Ruxith Sarani, Shooting Star 3300, The Fresh Prince of Con-Air, The Wizard Moose, Tyler Cranston and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders, Bear Sharktopus Studios, Chasghost, Corbinisms, Cozyboat 275, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Jesus Garcia, Manga Pages, Marion James E. Picata, Nitromo, RGS, Remti Bright, the Legendary Raven, and Too Much Desu, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. I'm only able to continue doing this thanks to the support of these lovely people, so if you'd like to be a part of these credits, as well as help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, please check out my YouTube membership or Patreon links in the description to see if I have anything you'd like on offer. And if you'd like to see another deck that loves its trap cards, check out this video I made covering Labyrinths. And if you want to see two Yu-Gi tubers going at it, check out Noah Jenkinai's latest series Progression Polls, where your voice shapes the format. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.